Just wanted to jump on for a few minutes and talk about day two, Iran, US, Israel. Uh, in brief, in brief, because when I came out here a little bit earlier, it was 30, and now it's down to 20 already, in almost no time. So, excuse me. What I was thinking about today, as I was what I do every week, because it's a habit of many decades, is I always review the Sunday news programs. You know, so this week, Face the Nation and Meet the Press, because they used to be very consequential as far as newsmakers, but people that you could consider, deep thinkers about important issues of diplomacy and national security. And all of the best and brightest would be on those programs every single week, and some of them would be on more than one of the three programs, depending on the taping schedule. And I can remember this is not going to be a long how things were better when I was young, because everything was better when we were young, I guess. But, even sitting and watching with my father in the 1970s, David Brinkley, This Week with David Brinkley. And, you're listening to people such as, love him or hate him, Henry Kissinger, a man who dedicated every moment of his life to the study of diplomacy and such things, and just a troubled individual with some views, with Nixon and the Vietnam. We're all flawed, but at least there were people there. You could go to those three main shows and get a read on what was happening in the world that you could trust. There is a stunning lack of trust these days, because the main news platforms have shifted in such a way. And I'm not going to waste time and try to uh, talk about the shitification of news delivery. It's a thing everybody knows, but we still need to get our information from somewhere, and people that provide opinions on various subjects need to gather information, process it, think about it, hopefully in a deep and sincere way, and share their opinions back to the nice people that they talk to. So, and that's the same as David Brinkley did with a large team of a bunch of young kids from Harvard and other such places that were really smart, and they would get together and develop a stunningly intelligent program. This week, not on the show this week, but Marco Rubio was was on exactly one program, and the other most perhaps the most senior government official that opened his yap this week was Lindsey Graham, which any world that is led with any show that leads with a Lindsey Graham think piece better reconsider their line of work, because South Carolina politics, as I've joked and harped on recently, with if you're talking about Tim Tim Scott, Lindsey Graham, and Nancy Mace as the core competence of your state's intellectual core, then you might as well give up. But in any case, I just this whole I thought about who is the lead Islamist in the administration, you know? Iran, as you probably heard, is a country of 90 million people. That is breaks down, and I don't have the stats in front of me, but let's just say that of that population, not a majority, but let's say 40% of them are, we'll say, Persian, you know, and then we break into little different parts of 15 to 20% are from various factions from around the Kurds and the Azaris and the other parts that make up that giant society, the rich cultural society. And they have problems just like anybody else. They have, a majority Shia population. They have the minority Kurds and other minority groups. And, but they made it work for better and for worse for a very long time. And we all have to hope that they, after this very difficult time, that they're able to come together and form some sort of governing body, whether it's as conservative a theocracy as was before. I would hope not, but that's just me. I had a I had a discussion with a double X chromosome member of our group from the platform yesterday, just in the chats, and she asked me a question that was with me today again, and I made a comment that was a little bit um, like a blithe and dismissive comment, grouping a bunch of old men together. And I made a comment that was something to the effect that Trump, Putin, Netanyahu, and the now deceased Ayatollah Khomeini were all responsible for material support of terrorism. And this delightful young woman pressed me to ask what example I could give, and she made a pointed, a question that said, what sort of terrorism was visited upon. I think she asked in the first instance against the United States by Iran in this last administration before the gentleman was assassinated in the last 48 hours. And because it strikes home with me, I I brought up the fatwa that was put on Salman Rushdie, right? And that was by the Ayatollah Khomeini way back in I think 2 or 3 years after the hostages were taken and subsequently released at the embassy. And lots of fire and brimstone between the U.S. and silly things like great satans and all of those kind of things, and smelling sulfur and fun little soliloquies. But I suggested, and would stand by my position that a fatwa that was placed on an individual for something he wrote is a form of terrorism. That's me. That is a lapsed Christian's perspective on a pronouncement by a Muslim cleric, right? So who's in a better position to interpret what the Muslim cleric's position and standing is to make such pronouncements. A cracker, former Episcopal, converted to Catholicism, to deliver a unified message to a minor double X child. Not a deeply in the practicing sense, not a deeply religious person. I would like to think that I'm religious in other ways. In Of course, because it's me, I'll think that it's in other virtuous ways, but that's self-serving. Yeah. So my position when I was discussing this with this delightful young uh, human on the other end of the Substack line was that is an act of terrorism, and you can think about from our perspective in the U.S. something you can't draw a direct comparison, but what about the edicts that resulted in the murder of people at Charlie Hebdo in France, if you'll remember, that that the Charlie Hebdo, which was and is a magazine of comics and other things, and what they did at a particular time is that they portrayed the Prophet Muhammad in ways that were disrespectful in the eyes of practitioners of the Muslim religion. So, and I don't have images, and I wouldn't display them in this context in any case. But if you don't remember, you can. There's a Google machine for a reason, and it's Charlie, like the name Charlie, and Hebdo, the magazine, and there were certain cartoonish portrayals of the prophet that were disrespectful from the perspective of Muslims. Right? So, and people were killed in the offices of the magazine. So, that, from my perspective, as somebody who champions freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of religion, for sure. But I would in my world, from my worldview, that speech is number one, two, and three, right? And expression and association and others, we take them we take them for granted. And now with Donald J. Trump, we realize that we should not take them for granted at all. Today is, and I'm going to put something up a little bit later, as late as I can make it tonight, is that today is the 1st of March, is the anniversary of the Articles of Confederation. Okay. So the precursor organizing document, what were the colonies when they're getting together to think about what they want to be. These were not, and these were not a Bill of Rights. This was more state sovereignty and and mutual defense. And it's interesting. So that was I'm going to just pick a number, but it's 1770 something, in that 250 year. What we're going to be celebrating as the 250-year anniversary, of course, this year, I would argue, is nothing of the sort, because until civil rights legislation in the United States in the 1960s, I would say we didn't become a country. So we shouldn't be celebrating the 250-year anniversary of anything, because we can't count the earlier part of our country's existence because not every member of the community was allowed to participate in this great experiment. People were specifically excluded. So I will argue that it ain't a 250-year anniversary that's going to be celebrated ad nauseum uh, by um, by DJT this year. It's it's a much more modest, let's call it it's year 70, 75th anniversary or something. But we'll do that on a different day. This tonight was just amateurism. I think the title was, I type it in, but it's too small. I can't read what I wrote. But it was something to the effect of in the shallow end of the kiddie pool. Right. So I think of the kiddie pool. I use that as a painfully and a distasteful analogy to people that lay around and piss in a pool and wonder why the water is getting warmer. Right. It's not always the smartest people. I mean, there are kids in the kiddie pool, but in my kiddie pool in my brain, it's adults in the shallow end wondering why things are warm when they're all pissing in the pool because they're too lazy to go to the restroom, right? Uh, these are the people that are running our government right now. And when I think of the MAGA minority, um, what who are the Islamists that are answering the calls? Think of the men and women in Tehran tonight that loved the supreme leader. Think about the people that worshiped every day, a number of times a day, and prayed for the health of the only leader that they knew in their lifetime, right? I would argue, oppressive did did the regime murder demonstrators? Yes. Yes, they did. That's that's uh, that's an unequivocal statement. That is indisputable fact. That happened, right? Was he a great? Was the supreme leader a great humanitarian in the global sense? No, perhaps not. But he was a man of tremendous faith that led millions of people every day, a number of times every day, to prayer. And on that one point, he deserves grace. And what he deserves is more than a president of, say, the United States degrading him as a human after he was just discovered to be dead, that he was killed by uh, missile strikes, whether Iranian or United States or from whatever authority. He was found dead. What you do if you look at there's a clip making its way that I'm sure you've seen making its way around the interwebs where it contrasts Barack Obama in the way that he referred to the killing, the way that he characterized the killing of Osama bin Laden, where he was killed, at what date and time the body was removed from the premises where it was killed. It was, it was prepared and it was given a burial at sea with some measure of dignity. And there wasn't high fiving, champagne cork popping, back slapping. Yeah, boy. Uh, None of that. Right. If you contrast that to Donald J. Trump and the former head of the IRGC, Mr. Soleimani, who the Trump 1.0 um, assassinated, and a legitimate bad guy, a man responsible for terrorizing many people to a degree that I am not familiar with because I am not part of that society and didn't get the day by day, and I wasn't following the evil exploits of Mr. Soleimani. Mm. Being outdoors, it does keep the water cold, so that's a positive. Excuse me. Oh, that's good. And it's just water. So boring. So dignity, expertise, right? Gravitas, that's seriousness, serious people, right? I frequently say these are silly people, you know? When you look at Pam Bondi's performance at the Congress, in the Congress, you look at Christy No, right? Look at no, I'm not going to take shots at Ms. Boebert. You look at Tulsi Gabbard and the way that Pete Hegseth, the way they conduct themselves, the fact that who do we send to negotiate? The toughest negotiator on the top three lists in the world is Vladimir Putin. You know, he negotiated his way as to be the number one campaign operative before the 2016 elections, and he's maintained a position in the U.S. government ever since. Dumb people don't do that. He is a clever KGB, full on spy supreme, right? He is an intelligence juggernaut, an assassin, and he knows what his mission is, and he takes the long view, and he stays on message, and he's disciplined. All the things that Donald Trump can never be. From a personality point of view, he is incapable of discipline, staying on point, on message, seeing things out. Venezuela, however many billions of dollars later, how many dead people that were floating, holding on to boats, and the double tap, and the number of people that were killed, Cuban and Venezuelan, that were killed on the ground, whatever, 200 odd people. Well, we may never know the the exact number, but what is what was the exit strategy? What was our plan? What was our goal? What did we hope to achieve by doing that? Was it all that to get Nick Maduro in U.S. custody? Okay. All right. Mission accomplished. Yeah. When you do the dollars and cents, and I don't know. I'm like I said, I'm not a Venezuelan national. I did live there. I love the country. He did bad things, but just by virtue of the fact that the U.S. government doesn't like what you're doing, are we setting a good precedent that we just go in, do a decapitation or other regime change? And what's the plan afterwards? Venezuela, Iran, 90 million people. Complex does not do it justice. In a very tough neighborhood with very tough neighbors. Sure, they have Vladimir Putin to help them right the ship and keep moving forward, to help them. If you want a guy to help you avoid sanctions and sell oil on the black market, Vote as your guy. He's been doing it all of his life. You need to get your oil to China because India now is saying, we're not going to do that because we need a business deal with the US and other folks who are going to sanction us if we buy Iranian oil on the black market or Russian oil. So, so that's all sorts of things that Vladimir Putin is more than willing to help for a cut. Putin, let's remember, we won't go into his involvement in the Epstein files, his and other Russian state security involvement in that endeavor, Ehud Barak, all the other people that were connected at that time, including Donald J. Trump. We're not going to go into that tonight. But these are, love him or hate him. And I joke a lot about Putin because the absurdity, Marco Rubio, you could say accurately that he spent most of his professional life in the Senate as a Russia hawk. Sure, he made statements today saying that I'm calling on Congress to do a better job funding Ukraine. Right? Lots of people have been trying to get funds to Ukraine before the real cold of the winter. Now that it's not warm out, it's not warm out here, but it is March. It's not December. Will Ukraine be in a similar place that they are today? They're 4-year anniversary. They're in the 5th year. Where will they be 24 months from today? I don't know. They could quite practically be in a similar situation because Donald J. Trump is still in power. Donald J. Trump is still under the influence of Russian state security. So all of the words that are said by Trump allies about we're getting serious on getting our European friends, our EU, our NATO friends to help Ukraine more, and we're going to sanction the F out of Russia. They've said that so many times they haven't done shit. Scott Bessent's talked about it, right? Treasury. Marco Rubio's talked about it a little bit. JD Vance doesn't want anything to do with it because he's trying to line up his next campaign and to see how he's going to overtake Marco Rubio as the apple of Donald Trump's eye, which can switch every 15 minutes. But I'm my official vote on those two guys is neither. But I guess if I had to choose now, I'd have to choose Rubio because all of his shortcomings, besides his physical shortcomings, he's not a Nazi. So that's good, right? That's generally thought of as good. Where do we where do we find where does Trump find these people, right? That's a more that is the talent acquisition dumpster fire that is the Trump administration. But I guess what I was longing for today, when you have the complexities of reassembling a complex, storied, beautiful country, an empire, really. You know, if you're somewhere between the Persian Empire and the country of Iran, and we've talked about, and I have today, and many of you as well, about the legacy of how the oil wealth has been exploited by outside sources, uh, over 115 years ago imagine, by Winston Churchill on behalf of the Admiralty, the British Navy. We don't want to, we're not going to have coal-fired burners and boilers on the ships. We're going to burn oil instead. We need to get oil. We don't have oil. So we're going to do a deal. And the genesis of British Petroleum in Iran and how they were treated badly. And then the first leader and the first and the prime minister that was jailed and Pahlavi's dad and the Shah and that whole thing. It's we're going to be seeing that played over and over again. And will the son of the Shah, Reza Pahlavi, who is whatever, a 60-year-old guy in the United States, is he somebody that can put together a coalition of the willing with the remnants of those that were in power in Iran? Will they allow, will the IRGC allow something like that to happen after they just saw, 40 of their cohort were killed in the last 48 hours? Maybe they're more flexible. Maybe they're more open-minded about coalition building. Maybe there's a way to, you know, corruption's not the, I mean, if they're worried about losing, not being able to wet the proverbial beak any longer because they've survived on corruption for so long, what happens if it stops? Just look at Venezuela, right? Corruption is continuing in full force and effect, right? Dulce Rodriguez, right? Who is, who's the Dulce Rodriguez for Iran? I guess the Dulce Rodriguez for Cuba is Marco Rubio, who would look pretty cute in a dress. So that's another chapter, and that's the next opportunity. But think about how thin we're spread. Think about, as we've talked about before, the Gerald R. Ford carrier battle group, but the Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier itself being long past its appointment for dry dock in Newport News, I guess, in Virginia, because the toilets don't work anymore. It's not fun to live on an aircraft carrier when you have to wait 40 minutes to go to the bathroom. That. Talk about operational readiness. That's a thing, right? And the other super ships, that they are the next two aircraft carriers that will come online are a member of a class that is now called the Gerald R. Ford class aircraft carrier. And they're just these modern, monstrous, wonderful ships. But they won't be online for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years for the next two boats to come out. One's the Enterprise, and the other is I was going to say JFK, but I don't think it has Kennedy in it. It might, but one is the Enterprise, Captain Kirk, and the other one is another one. But they won't be online. They certainly won't be online fast enough to use the bathrooms. So that our most potent weapon, as we hollow out our defenses in the Pacific to FAFO in the Arabian Sea. That's going to go to dry dock. We're going to be without that key weapon of war. We still got 7 or 8, other ones that are working, but they're not our very best. And what's President Xi doing? Just biding his time, watching, learning, talking to intelligent people, gathering intelligence, while we are being led by folks that don't think deeply about anything. If you ask Pete Hegseth on a Sunday program, you're talking about Iran, and you say, "What's next?" Look at his watch, and he'll say, "I just had breakfast. What's next is lunch." right? That's that's strategic planning with the Trump administration. So, yeah, we're doing absolutely great. We're in really good hands. It's heartwarming. It's awe-inspiring, and just a callback to a time when serious people, Richard Holbrooke, Jim Baker, Brent Scowcroft, right? These people that were decorated. Brent Scowcroft was is he a four-star general? Maybe before he went into the National Security Agency. It's been a while, but chops, bona fides, people that had, you know, or to put it more colloquially, which is hard to say when it gets really cold out, is he knew shit. He knew stuff, right? And he knew how to communicate. Excuse me. Who one of the predecessors of your boy Pistol Pete Hegseth? How about Colin Powell? Right? Was Colin Powell's legacy damaged somewhat by the Iraq War? About WMD? Perhaps. But when you look at his career in its entirety and the dignity that he brought to the position, no, there's no comparison. Now, I don't know what his position would be today because you can be fired for being black and accomplished, or just black, or uh, black or brown at the Pentagon. So that's a fireable offense, or double X chromosome. You can also be fired. So they are not committed to best and brightest. They are committed to MAGA and whitest, right? How about that? Yeah, that wasn't that great. In any case, I'm hoping that there are secretly very sophisticated Islamists advising the State Department and the Department of Defense, DOD, right? It's not Department of War. That would be Dow, and that is your homegirl Pamela Joe Bondi's area of expertise. So I just hope there are some really intelligent, I always say Harvard, but some historians, some people from the region that can give the proper perspective on what's next. Not lunch after breakfast, right? Dinner after lunch. That is not strategic plan. How do we, with our friends, you know, Benjamin Netanyahu, what is next for him? Staying out of prison and then an election. That's what he's thinking about. And what he can do to kneecap the judiciary in Israel, just as Donald Trump is thinking about what he can do to destroy rule of law. So there's no accountability. And he's trying to kneecap the ICC because he's one of the greatest risks following his pregnancy, his presidency, his pregnancy. Oh my God, that's disgusting. Is the ICC one of the few courts that cannot be influenced by the U.S. courts or any other U.S. Body? So they're taking away funding, for the International Criminal Court. Right now, they're deliberating about the Philippines' former president Duterte, right? And they are just meeting now to see if they're going to bring charges against him based on war crimes, and they very narrow set of charges they can bring in the ICC. But Donald Trump and Netanyahu look at it as a risk because those are courts that could reach them if they were able to uh, take them into custody in a country that recognizes the ICC. But what could be better than Donald Trump and Bibi sharing a cell in The Hague for a day? I know they're 80 whatever by the time they get there. Do we want to be as cruel as they are? Does that make us feel good or does that make us feel superior? No. Probably should make us feel superior to behave with more dignity than they do. But how delightful would it be to decide to have them on trial in a public forum and face charges and answer for their crimes, then send them home. Just so something sticks and a label that we can staple to their forehead about an ICC conviction, that will be their legacy. Because right now it's a legacy of lies and it's continuing and it feeds upon itself. So, in any case, it's like, once again a beautiful evening. It's now below 20 degrees, feels like Fahrenheit in northern Massachusetts, and single digits overnight, and 50s next week. Melt a little bit of the. Still, we have 2 feet of snow on the ground, but let's think about when people ask what's next for Iran. Let's treat it with the dignity that it deserves, that the people of the country don't. If you feel about the now former, now deceased supreme leader in a particular kind of way, if you have antipathy or animosity towards him or other leaders, don't allow that to be reflected, or that the shade of, you'll excuse me, to be reflected onto the people of the country, because they're just folks like you and me trying to do their best. And so give them a little bit of grace if you can, and have a beautiful night. Thank you for your time. Restack, retweet, all of that fun stuff, and enjoy your evening. Thank you very much.